I just wanted to play video games.
All right, guys, I'm not feeling great today, so I'm not going to be appearing on camera. And I apologize, this video might be a little bit rambly. I have like a general framework that I want to approach, but I'm not great at scripting. Maybe if some of you guys are better at it, you can help me out, because I don't mind reading like scripted content, but I kind of work best when I'm just sort of like talking to people and having a conversation, and I don't usually get to do that even working at Honey Badger Radio. So what I want to talk today about is this concept of the woke right, but beyond that, how I don't think a lot of people understand that we don't live in a world where there is a right wing, or at least like a conservative value system, a conservative set of values that are in the prominent culture. There are pockets, there are parts of, you know, the West that are like actually conservative, but most of it, especially the stuff on the internet, especially the stuff in our popular culture, is just not. Like, the truth is, we're all living under a liberal world order. It has been this way since World War II, and at least, you know, and if not older, and none of us have really escaped it. So we're just operating within different degrees of liberalism. So when people talk about, you know, the right wing or the conservatives, it doesn't make sense, because they're just talking about liberals that haven't completely towed the line on whatever the current enforced doctrine of progressivism is. And so they're just sort of like maybe a couple decades behind. For example, if you talk to any conservative, I put that in quotes, commentator or conservative woman, and ask her about like what matters or what's important or how the world should look, she's, especially when it comes to women, she's going to most likely, like a 90% chance, she's going to regurgitate feminist talking points, even if she would say she's not a feminist. What you call yourself doesn't matter. It's what you believe and what you say that matters, right? So I'm bringing this up because I think the conversation around all of this stuff has to change. And on some level, we do have to look at what we believe and what we value, and make a determination on what we want to keep and what we want to discard. Because this idea that there is like a, say, I don't know, a war of values or ethics, and it's based in a conservative versus liberal position, is just not the paradigm. The paradigm is all liberal, and there's very little of it that's actually legitimately conservative, especially, like I said, on the internet. And I'll give you guys an example of that. So I'm going to show you a little bit of a trailer. There's a studio, a new studio, and I like them for the most part, that has been trying to create, let's say, more Christian, or at least more focus on conservative content, called Angel Studios. And Angel Studios is, if I remember correctly, and forgive me if I'm wrong here, I believe they're funded by Mormons. Mormons, they're, you know, kind of a weird fringe. I wouldn't even, I don't know if I would call them Christian, but they would call themselves Christian. They're a, well, you know, they're Mormons, and they make a lot of money. So they kind of like built this Angel Studios, and Angel Studios has done a lot of really great work. For example, they made the very popular series The Chosen. They gave us films like the Sound of Freedom, which was excellent, and it was lambasted by the progressive media. And of course, they attacked it as kind of conservative, QAnon, Trump supporting, MAGA, blah, blah, blah content. And because of the aggressive you know, attack of that studio, you would think, oh, well, they must be a really conservative studio. They even, like I said, they gave us The Chosen, which is essentially the story of Jesus and all of the New Testament stuff, the gospel, done in a show format. And It's great that that exists. I think it's a really good show. I recommend it. It's well made. It's very, well crafted. It's made to be engaging and all of that. And all that's great. But that doesn't make them conservative. I know you're going to say that doesn't make sense, but it's not enough that you're making, a show about the New Testament, or you have a film about child trafficking that nobody else wants to touch. I mean, it's certainly sort of countercultural. It's certainly something that people need. It's like they're answering a kind of like cry for, something, let's say, different from other than like the usual sort of ultra diverse, progressive, gay race communism that comes out of Netflix and all of the mainstream studios. But that doesn't make it conservative on its own. And so I will give you another example of this. They also have this other film coming out called The World We Make. And I'm going to show you a little bit of the... we're going to watch a little bit of the trailer for this. And I'll come back on the other side. Oh, I got to go to the beginning. I'm sorry.
I want to prove I can do something big. I just need to get out of here for a while and think about my life. Figure out my place in the world. Hey, Jordan.
Hey, Lee. Done shoveling you know what?
You should probably just stick to football.
I don't get you horse people. Logan! Let me kill these ghouls.
I'm gonna do a cross-country ride.
I'll have to train 3 horses.
Just wanted to see if I could help out with something. I'm up early working out anyway.
5:30 a.m.
Wow. Bright and way too early.
What's gonna happen when you go? I want somebody to hang out with. Maybe play some basketball with Logan.
Yeah, sure.
Bet you're really good at basketball.
What makes you say that? Because I'm black? I'm actually pretty bad at basketball, so.
Okay.
You just got a scholarship offer to play at the best school in California.
I'm so happy for you.
Thanks, Lee. So how does this work? You just gonna get on a horse and ride off into the sunset?
This is my dream.
Well, I'm all about dreams. Talk to me.
Also, you got you a white girlfriend.
What does she see in you?
You think she's gonna want a future with you if you can't play football, if you can't afford school? She's gonna break your heart.
You're obviously more than friends. Why would you keep that a secret from me?
Do you really want to go through life worrying about this all the time?
Don't give up. Sometimes you find your path when you least expect it.
We're from 2 different worlds.
We'll make our own little world right here.
I'm gonna stop it there. So like it goes on and it's very predictable, and this is like put out by Angel Studios. Look, I'm not saying there's a problem with race mixing. I don't think that that's necessarily a liberal or conservative position. I think that like to some degree this has always happened, but the way the film treats it as though it's some like wild fringe thing that's not happening in the current year. Like absolutely it's happening. Like my wife is white and I'm, Puerto Rican. I mean, this sort of stuff happens everywhere. Actually, where I live here in Virginia, there's lots of mixed race couples, but the way that they're framing it as like the struggle that's happening, it's obviously taking from the progressive tone of our current world. Like this is essentially how far the Overton window has moved, to the point where telling a story of a boy and a girl who are from different worlds and they find each other and they fall in love and they try to make it work despite, whatever their obstacles are. And because they happen to be different races, you have to like create this like additional tension. It's very much a very liberal film, even if it's not, it doesn't look that way on the surface because it doesn't have like some of the more overt elements that you might expect from, like if Netflix did it, there'd be Klansmen, there'd be MAGA people, it'd be really, really over the top and ridiculous. There'd be a a trans person in the relationship, you know, it would be absolutely like out of nowhere. But this stuff is very, very normal by comparison. So we think it's conservative, but it isn't. Like it's framing the kind of like racial politics of like the 90s. That's what I mean when I say we're not living in a world where conservatism has, as a real concept, has any foothold in culture. So when we look as far back as media is willing to go, it's still going to be like from only 20 or 30, maybe 40 years ago. You know, and that's about it. So that's kind of where it's at. Now, the way I bring this up because I've been talking about this for a long time. There's been this discussion about the woke right, and I've often contended that this is just a how do I put this? It's just an attack on anything that looks conservative. And again, we don't live in a world that's got a lot of conservatism in it at all, you know, because simply being Christian is not conservative. There's plenty of progressive Christian churches in the country. And no matter what the denomination is, like I'm an Orthodox Christian, and that's probably the most like traditional church, even, you know, some would argue more than the Catholic Church. I think it is, but I don't know. And yet they still have problems with progressivism and liberalism creeping in. Like there's, you know, there are calls for female deacons. There are calls for, you know, like some, like little, it comes out in little ways, like racial awareness, stuff like that. And the truth is, none of that stuff applies to Christianity. Christ was about unity, not diversity. These are very different things, okay? But it manages to creep in because when all of the water you swim in changes, you can't help but feel like it becomes normal to you, okay? So anyway, the woke right label is used by people who call themselves classical liberals or liberals that don't like leftists, but they're still carrying water for progressivism to some degree. And this is an obstacle that has to be overcome. And I've been saying this for many years that, like, okay, the left is absolutely insane. They want to murder you. They think it's funny. They want you broke. They want you homeless. I get all that. And I despise all of that. Okay. And I'm fighting against that as hard as I can. They have changed my life in a way that I don't know if I'll ever get it back in the way that I had it because of progressives. I don't want to say I hate them because I don't think that's not the way forward, but I have a lot of anger still for what they have done, and they have killed people like Charlie Kirk, and I will never forgive them for that, or at least like I can't do it. But that being said, the current obstacle we face now, we know who the enemy is what I'm saying. But now we have to deal with the centrists. And this is what I've been saying for a long time. The centrists are a problem because most of them are just liberals carrying water, as I said, for the left, in terms of like they maintain a kind of status quo of like what is permissible. All right. So I saw this video where Sargon of Akkad, Carl Benjamin, who I've had the pleasure of meeting a few times, talks about this woke right concept. So I'm gonna play a bit of this video, and I want you to listen to this, okay? Because I agree with this.
A series of power structures that they perceive, and it is in this that James is identifying the wokeness. In discussing this on my Account Daily channel, I offhandedly said, well, the problem with the woke left isn't really the woke part, it's the left part. And I've had this thrown back in my face several times, so I just want to be categoric. That statement is true. That is completely correct, and I stand by it, because actually the problem isn't the woke part, it is the left part, because the left part is what informs the woke part. I will explain, but the people who are reacting to this, they've been primed by James Lindsay and Joel Berry to react to this, are just reacting from ignorance. They just don't know what they're dealing with. However, I do know what they're dealing with, because I spent the last, 7 or 8 years deeply studying left-wing ideology through their primary texts. I would read their university books. I would read the books that they brought to bear on the poor students in the universities to make them into woke leftists. And so I went through all of these. I went through all of the critical theory manuals and like the tomes and the lectures that I had to study. I listened to their thought leaders. And then I also did my philosophy degree, and I also did my master's degree in philosophy studying liberalism. So I have a much better grasp of liberalism and leftism than any of these people who are calling me names. And I am telling you that the only difference, really, apart from the depth of knowledge, but the only real difference between myself and the centre-right critics of woke is that I let my attachment to liberalism go.
That's exactly right. So this is the thing I see a lot with centrists, or people who call themselves classical liberals, or people who claim to be politically homeless. You see this all the time. All it is fear. Fear of letting go of leftism or liberalism, right? Liberalism is what permits leftism, but like essentially they're not the same. But liberalism is what allowed leftism to essentially dominate all of our cultural institutions, all of our political institutions, all of our academic institutions, because it placed tolerance as the highest virtue. And there was no room for wisdom. There was no room for the transcendent. It was all materialist. It was all secular, okay? And anyway, the problem with the woke left is not the woke part. The woke part is simply another way of saying the analysis, the way that it essentially observes the world. Like the left says everything is power dynamics, etc. But that's not the problem, because a recognition of hierarchy is a thing that we all do. The problem is the left part. And he is right about this. And this is very difficult for people because we live in a world where that is the dominant ideology. That is the predominant, preeminent, ubiquitous way of seeing the world, right? Leftism is the world. We are in it, with it. And so people cannot conceive of a world without it, so they become afraid, so they can't let it go. And Carl has let it go, and I let it go a long time ago, and I have often said, and you can look at my old videos, some of the streams I did with HBR, where I've said, you have to question your liberalism. Like, just question it. Like, what am I doing why do I believe this? Why do I think that liberalism is just the good ideology? Like, why do I think it's just the good stuff? Why do I think it's when good things happen? Why do I think that? That doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense logically. Anyway,
I realized that fundamentally is a teleological ideology that is trying to create something, and so I can approach this subject without moral investment, without emotional investment in it, because James Lindsay and Joel Berry are trying to defend liberalism, and frankly, I think that that's where the problem lies. Woke itself is actually not the issue. Woke is what we colloquially call intersectionality, which is actually a descriptive framework that identifies the different intersections of where certain identities, and they're picked by the woke leftists themselves, but you could apply this to any identity you like, where they intersect in a social manner. This highlighting of the interaction between personal identities and people purports to describe how wider society is construed. Woke, then, is actually a tool developed by the communists to identify those points of weakness in the hierarchy of society, so they could, in Gramscian fashion, formulate their arguments to further tear them down, to further equalize society. The issue is not actually that identification, because the identification of the structures of society is something that anyone can do, And honestly, if you want to have a proper understanding of society, you kind of do need to do that. And if you don't do that, what you're actually doing is rendering yourself willfully blind. I mean, one of the criticisms the woke left have of the sort of centre-right liberals is actually the liberal mysticism that I've been talking about, that it deliberately obscures things that are otherwise true about society.
Yeah. So the thing about liberalism is that it presumes that essentially it takes on this blank slate view, which it sounds fair on the surface, because it's like, well, the last thing a liberal wants to be is prejudiced. We don't want to prejudge. But the problem is that you set yourself up for problems when you don't exercise, let's say, discernment of the world around you. And so this will create issues. And leftists at least acknowledge that. That's why leftists and liberals don't get along, because liberals will say things like they're race blind or they're gender blind, and leftists will say, no, you can't do that. That's racist and sexist. But the problem with leftists is that they have a different prescription, not a description. The woke part, or the acknowledgement of reality, observable reality, is not an issue, because we all see it. You have to be, stoic in seeing and describing what is reality. The problem comes when you prescribe. I think he's going to say that too.
The woke left doesn't have a monopoly on identifying power dynamics. They just have a very easy-to-use tool and framework with which to do it, which is why there are so many woke leftists constantly making power critiques about society. But like I said, the issue is actually not that they have a descriptive lens to explain what society is actually like. The issue is the normative framework that instructs a person on what to do with that information. Woke, as in intersectionality itself, cannot actually command what ought to be done with the information that it provides. That actually does have to come from outside of intersectionality. And because the framework was designed and used by communists, obviously everyone naturally associates it very closely with the communist desire to tear everything down. And this close contact makes them look indistinguishable to the layman outside of it, but actually they aren't. It's actually quite possible to read against the grain, as it were, with woke, as an ideological lens, to identify those social structures upon which society rests and shore them up. A right-wing approach to woke ideology actually tells us where society needs help and support.
So, he's saying intersectionality is a communist-derived tool for spotting societal weaknesses, but he contends that it can be used against the grain by the right to identify and reinforce hierarchies such as family and community bonds rather than tearing them down. Okay? Center-right liberals like Lindsay and Barry, these are the people he was responding to, that's James Lindsay and Joel Barry, defend liberalism, which is flawed because it promotes a mystical blindness to true power structures and hierarchies. So then you can't, because liberals don't want to see the world as it is, because they want to pretend like, everyone is the same. To some degree, they are doing that. Then it constantly puts them in a position of weakness against the left, which has no problem reinforcing this stuff. And they don't care about things like hypocrisy. They don't care about things like consistency. They care about one thing, and that's power. And they have a very simple tool set to use it. And liberals are unequipped. They can't stop it. But they can't. But what they do instead is they end up being an obstacle for people like Carl and myself that actually want to address this. So liberalism itself is actually the original woke ideology. It was a foundational anti-hierarchical movement. The Rousseauian idea of a man being free but in chains, where the chains are the social bonds, acting as a universal acid that dissolves traditions, making woke leftism merely an extension of liberal principles. Liberalism was always going to lead to leftism. So, this is the, I guess, this is the issue, the struggle that I'm having with this, because a lot of the people that I work with and talk to, they're against wokeness, what they would call wokeness. They're against progressivism and leftism, but they don't seem to see the scale of the problem. And it's scary because it means you have to question something that's older than you are, and you have to find something, well, you might think it's novel, but it's actually very old. And I think that we have to reckon with this. We're not going to be able to win if we don't address the centrists, because the centrists are actually not centrists. They're leftists. They just don't think they're leftists because they're not crazy blue-haired, screeching, non-binary, transgender, Black Lives Matter supporting retards. They think that they're just like the decent liberals, but that's the problem. So I suggest that we move beyond liberalism as the foundation of our society, and we just get into honest discourse. This isn't just this is a very pervasive ideology. It's everywhere. And we have to ask some serious questions about where we go from here. I'm sorry that this has been a little bit rambly, but I've been meaning to talk about this for a while, and this is probably not the last time I bring this up. But I'm really glad that Carl is identifying this issue, and he understands this, because this is very important. It's actually crucial. If you notice, and I don't want this to go too long, but Piers Morgan is a really good example of this kind of, well, we call him a boomer liberal, but his liberalism is actually quite mainstream and normal. And he had on Nick Fuentes, and he couldn't believe the things that Nick Fuentes said when he tried to get him by saying you're a racist, or you don't like women, or you're anti-Semitic, and none of it worked. And that's because those labels are based on lies. Those things don't exist, guys. There's no such thing as racism, sexism, homophobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, whatever. Those things don't exist. Those terms are just tools to silence people. And young people, in particular young men, are figuring this out, and they're done with it because they want to have an honest conversation without barriers, without guardrails. And that's the only way that's going to happen. And the reason why I bring that up is because those terms are a product of liberalism. So just something to take into consideration. Let me know what you guys think. And if you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, to the bell for notifications, leave me a comment. Let me know what you guys think about what we talked about on this video. And yeah, share it if you like to. And I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Long live Vivian.
I just want